Welcome back to the Life of Gautama Buddha series. In episode 8, we heard about the birth of Rahula, the son of Prince Siddhārtha and Yasodhara. The story begins with Yasodhara giving birth, with the help of Lady Gautami. The prince anxiously waited outside and heard the baby crying. When the prince was informed of the birth of his son, he felt both joy and anxiety. He named his son Rahula, which means bond, reflecting his thoughts that having a child would be a bondage in life. The prince held his child and pondered the nature of life, birth and death, and suffering. Although he loved his son, he was determined to find a way to free all beings from suffering. Yasodhara understands and accepts the prince's decision to leave home. Finally, the episode ends with the prince's decision to leave home at the age of 29, marking an important turning point in the prince's life. The Life of Buddha, Episode 9, The Last Supper and the Fateful Departure. The ancient city of Kapilavatthu is truly splendid and magnificent tonight. To celebrate having a grandson, a beautiful prince, the king held a banquet for the entire city for 3 days. After 3 days, the king will widely announce the coronation day for the prince to officially ascend the throne. On this occasion, not only will the people have their taxes reduced, but the death row inmates will be pardoned, and those with minor crimes will be pardoned. The whole country will have 7 more days of fun, with funds from the royal family and the town sponsored. Every night, the palace was as dazzling as a great diamond. On the walls, the tall watchtowers were decorated like lanterns, and at regular intervals of several dozen arm spans, giant torches were erected, glowing brightly against the sky. The king also ordered the streets to be decorated as if for a festival. The guards took turns keeping watch over the pine resin, tamanu oil, peanut oil, etc., lamps all night long. In the park of the Palace of Joy, the prince had finished preparing somewhere for a banquet. He wanted to celebrate with the princes, as a last meeting before quietly leaving to live a wandering life. Yasodhara regained her normal health in just a few days, thanks to the royal medicine and the devoted care of 2 royal physicians. But the prince advised her to rest, and also talked with her 2 mothers and her younger sister Sundarinanda. They had arrived early. Perhaps they were so engrossed in their happy conversation that from time to time soft laughter could be heard. The prince felt reassured. The child had brought them rare joy. When the western citadel hid the last rays of sunlight, dusk had just fallen, giving way to the light of fire. Bright chandeliers here and there in the aisles, among the rows of trees, the gardens, illuminated the luxurious tables where the maids had carefully prepared food and drinks. Tonight, the maids, dancers, and singers were dressed and made up like jade girls. The musicians, dancers, looked like fairies. All their sarongs, dresses, scarves, belts had a blue background. Sky blue, sea blue, green, banana green, so they looked gentle and cool like a spring poem by a nature poet. An elaborate open-air stage was built between 2 rose apple trees, also decorated with colorful silk brocade and embroidered flowers. Plumeria, jasmine, chrysanthemum, marigold, kadamba, kempaka, siraka flowers were woven into garlands and strings from the high border, looking extremely graceful and seductive. The space was filled with the scent of incense. The prince sat pensively by the incense burner, looking up at the blue sky with a silvery moon. Countless stars twinkled dimly. The southern stars were dim. The northern stars were like broken diamonds on a chain. Oh, where did they hang in that deep, endless blue sky? Horses neighed, horse bells jingled, and carriage wheels screeched to a halt outside the gate. The princes, one after another, appeared one after another. They were all there. All the talented figures of both ancient cities were there. The prince smiled and hugged each other happily, thinking in his heart that they would be his powerful assistants in the future when he discovered the great path, the path of immortality. That night was truly special. It had been a long time since they had such a joyful meeting. Since the failed cooperation in reforming and modernizing the country, they had been separated, each returning to their duties and responsibilities. Most of them had replaced the old generation to become governors, ministers, or assistants to the Council of Elders. The path to becoming an official was rich and glorious. Some were majestic and mature, but some had a few wrinkles at the corners of their eyes and foreheads. The prince observed each person, and he clearly felt that no one was happy. They laughed heartily, generously, carefree. But everyone wanted to hide behind their worries and sorrows, especially Mahanam, who had a family full of wives and children. Next was Bhadia, a wise official respected by the court. Only Ananda and Anuruddha, both of whom steadfastly refused to become officials or get married, were still joyful, innocent, and pure. On the open-air stage, the group of dancers and the group of singers took turns with their special performances. They entered the party, ate and drank, wished each other happiness, congratulated each other, health, longevity, success, fame. Everyone was well-educated, knowledgeable, had a strong spiritual life, and had a deep soul. They all knew that those compliments were polite, but without those words on the tip of their tongues, they wouldn't know what to say. They were helpless before the finite, before the constraints of language, of everyday social relations, and didn't know what to do. They ate and drank moderately. They listened and watched moderately. The prince ordered his maid to bring more food and drink. Then, wanting to break the silence, he said, "How is work in the towns, guys?" Bhadia said loudly, "I don't want to be a governor. I just want to be an assistant to see what the job is like, to see what I can do for the people. But in the end, it's useless, my prince. Please be more specific." "There will be many opinions here," the crown prince asked with concern. Bhadia sighed. "Not to mention the 73,000 people working hard, miserable, poor, in a town of 110,000 people, like in Kapilavatthu, is difficult to solve. Not to mention the evils of bureaucracy, corruption, bribery, of officials running professional establishments. In towns, villages, wards, are long-standing diseases that are difficult to cure. Just a small matter in my town, with only a few tens of thousands of people, wanting to bring the poor out of the life of animals, to live like humans, is not possible." The prince understood what Bhadia meant. He had observed many villages of the Shudra people. They did not have a proper house. All they had were huts, caves, and makeshift, rudimentary roofs. Their sleeping quarters were wooden and bamboo stalls, haphazardly assembled, rickety and rotten. In some places they even slept on the dirty ground. That was not all. In front of the rickety entrance, on the left were 5 or 7 goats, on the right were a few cows. The animal feeding troughs were thrown haphazardly on piles of all kinds of garbage. Goat dung, cow dung, and their urine, after a long time, soaked the ground with a strong, foul smell. Standing 20 fathoms away, the stench was so strong that it made one nauseous and vomit. However, those Shudra people lived together, lived with the goats, cows, and that filth and stench, peacefully and freely. Their rags, poverty, illness, scabies, are truly beyond cure, truly beyond the ability to save. "Oh, the prince understood very well, very well," Kimbila interjected, sounding both sarcastic and confiding. "Just reform, just innovate. Then this measure affects this person, that measure affects another person. Swallowing the bowl of aristocratic rice tastes as bitter as soapberry." Anuruddha laughed heartily. "The knife's sheath is too tight. If you use all your strength to pull it out, it won't come out. What can you say about drawing the knife to help, to save the suffering, to assist the people, to help the country?" Ananda agreed, but said mockingly, "Then, brother, put down your weapon. Look at me, I have neither a knife nor a sword." Everyone laughed. Mahanama spoke calmly. "Bhadia's story is ours. It's the same in my town. It's a 1,000-year-old problem." He bowed his head, was silent for a moment, then continued. "Anuruddha and Ananda are so happy, so smart. They have escaped the shackles of officialdom and also escaped the shackles of wives and children. Congratulations, congratulations." Mahanama held a glass of lemon wine and had not yet had time to clink glasses with everyone when Anuruddha teased. "We are certainly smart, but happiness still needs to be considered. You have 2 wives and 4 children, that is not enough. You also have a beautiful and charming woman. The result of this passionate and romantic love affair is that you have a beautiful little girl, Vasabhakatiya, who is as beautiful as a little fairy. What a gift of happiness." Mahananam bowed his head sadly. Anuruddha clinked glasses with Ananda. "We are on the same side. Congratulations. At the same time, we support this mixed blood relationship that everyone opposes." The prince knew about this, and the entire council of Sakya elders condemned it, making Mahanama's worries even more confused and bewildered, so he opened his mouth to share and sympathize. Everyone's blood is red. Everyone's sweat and tears are salty. Why discriminate between bloodlines? We all support each other, right? Everyone clapped their hands in agreement. Brother is right. Devadatta now slowly spoke. I resolutely refused to get married, but I could not entrust the royal assistant to anyone. Kolaya's situation was no different from Sakya's. Just like Bhatia, Mahanam said, he could not do anything properly. Everything was half-hearted. Everything was just a superficial situation. The meaning and value of life became more and more obscure. The mind was not at peace. The mind was not at peace. After such brief joys, my brothers confided in me like this. Perhaps those were my most memorable and happiest memories. Then when I returned, I was busy with work. On one side, I bumped into the wall of tradition. On the other side, I bumped into nothingness, emptiness, and confused views. What was the point of living? The joy of the five senses was too trivial, but spiritual aspirations only brought pain and abyss. Pain and abyss were everywhere. After Devadatta's confession, the atmosphere of the party seemed to be gloomy. It seemed that this was also the common feeling of the princes, so everyone was pensive and quiet. Everyone was indifferent to the programs and performances on the open-air stage. The moon became brighter and brighter as the night progressed. The night was vast and quiet. A few cool breezes blew down from the north. The trees and grass rustled. Suddenly a voice came from the porch. Don't see me off, Gopa. The night dew is not good. The prince stood up and walked quickly. Let the prince see you two home. No. Lady Gautama looked at the princes. Please enjoy with your friends a little longer. After a while, the singers and dancers were allowed to rest. The princes also took their leave one by one. While the maids and servants cleaned up the banquet, the prince slowly strolled to the end of the garden. The torches were still shining brightly. The prince sat motionless on a rock for a long time, not noticing that the dew had fallen heavily. Yasodhara glanced at the prince's figure disappearing behind the trees. She put on her scarf and covered her head, walked around to the opposite corner of the garden, cleared her throat, and knocked on the door of the small hut. Chana, Chana. The lamp was turned on. It turned out that Chana was awake. Seeing Lady Yasodhara, Chana stammered, My lady, I wonder. Shh! The princess said softly. Don't let the prince know. Prepare the saddle, the night-traveling robes, and even good food for the horses. Tonight, the prince will need you in Kantaka. Yasodhara left, but Chana still looked on with gaping eyes. And indeed, that night, the prince decided to leave. Waiting until everyone was asleep, he walked around the park, looking at the lakes, the bonsai trees, the stone lanterns, the flower beds, the paths that had become familiar over the years. He said to himself, Thank you, my friends of flowers and grass, for giving me moments of peace and relaxation. Today I bid you farewell. After that, the prince walked around the corridor of the summer palace. Everywhere was as quiet as a sheet of paper. Occasionally, the grinding of teeth, the snoring of servants and maids echoed. The bright moon shone through the open windows. The chandeliers were still shining here and there. The prince wanted to see Yasodhara and Rahula for the last time. When he passed the luxurious room for the singers and dancers, he suddenly stopped. After a tiring performance, the girls were sleeping all over, loose, untidy. They were the beauties who had been selected, as beautiful as celestial fairies, but now they looked like corpses. Some had their skirts pulled down, exposed, lying down, calmly snoring. Some had their makeup smeared, their skin pale, their mouths open, saliva dribbling from the corners of their mouths. Some were lying with their legs crossed over each other, blatantly exposing their naked bodies. The smell of powder, lipstick, saliva, sweat, breath, skin, mixed together to give off a sickening synthetic smell. Oh, it turns out this is the truth behind the so-called beauty, sound, and wonderful taste of life, that for countless lifetimes they have led us and sentient beings into the realms of intoxicating desire. It is truly a cemetery, a graveyard that emits a foul odor, which has seduced us and sentient beings to wander endlessly in birth and death, and then sink into samsara for countless lifetimes. The prince stood motionless. I have seen you, beauty. I have seen the gorgeous decorations on the outside of that foul body, and then there are the melodious, deep sounds, the fragrant, alluring scents, the delicious, fatty, sweet delicacies, the smooth, soft touch. All of them, they tempt the world to infatuation. But in truth, their nature is empty, disgusting. Before the prince's eyes suddenly appeared thoughts of comparison with images, one after another. That temptation is like a dry bone that a pack of dogs are tearing at and fighting over. They are fighting for their lives to get the bone. But what can they do? They can only swallow their own saliva. That temptation is like a piece of rotten meat that kites, crows, vultures swoop down to snatch. One bites it and takes it away, while another chases after it, pecks at it, and fights over it. In the end, none of them gets anything. All that happens is skin abrasions, feathers falling out, and blood flowing. That temptation is like a person holding a burning torch of dry grass, walking against the wind. The fire touches his hand, but he still refuses to let go. In the end, he is burned, in pain to the point of almost death. That temptation is like a pit of burning coals, covered with a layer of white ash. On it, there are people who are still carefree, innocent, walking back and forth, happy and cheerful, dancing, singing. Suddenly, they fall into the pit, being burned, writhing in pain. That temptation is like someone dreaming of extreme wealth, glory, and enjoying 100-fold satisfaction in sensual pleasures. When he wakes up, it turns out that there is nothing there. Only the bones are aching. The body and mind are tired. That is real. Temptation is like something borrowed for a moment. Only a moment, because it cannot be enjoyed for long. When returned to impermanence, it turns out that empty-handed is still empty-handed. Only regret, bewilderment, and sadness remain. That temptation is like a ripe fruit that is poisonous. Seeing a ripe fruit with beautiful skin, shiny, smooth, red, fragrant, then picking and eating it, oh, it is wonderful. The ripe fruit is sweet and fragrant. But after eating, the poison seeps into the stomach, into the small intestine, into the blood. The person writhes and screams, eyes roll back, turn white, skin turns purple, greasy sweat flows. These are signs of death. Those temptations not only fascinate one person, a few people, but they poison the whole world. Husbands and wives, children, brothers and sisters, friends, relatives, also because of them give rise to countless tragic situations, separation and heartbreak. And then there are families, castes, villages, tribes, also because of them give rise to conflicts, violence, hatred, war. Mutual slaughter, blood flows like rivers, bones pile up like mountains. The crown prince sighed once more. His will to become a monk once more became even more determined. The prince lifted the curtain and looked into Yasodhara's room. She and her child were sleeping peacefully. The prince stepped closer. Through the light, the prince saw Rahula's face hidden behind a piece of silk cloth from Yasodhara's left arm. The prince wanted to hold his child, wanted to see her face for the last time. As he reached down, the prince suddenly stopped, afraid of disturbing the princess's sleep. She usually slept very soundly, and so his departure became even more difficult. The prince was afraid of her tears. A woman's tears can paralyze and weaken the will of all men. The prince stood and looked at Yasodhara. She was truly a woman with all 5 beauties, not to mention the beauty of her soul that is hard to find in the world. Even in her sleep, she still radiated a dignified, discreet look, like a half-opened flower bud. Lying on her right side, one leg bent, one leg stretched, exactly the way the mother of the world lies. Oh, she has been with me all this way, except for the natural weakness of femininity. The prince sees her as a flawless mani-pearl without any defect in beauty or virtue. Oh well. Anyway, the prince has said everything. Don't be attached or lingering any longer. Even this sweet temptation, I must cut it off. He stepped out softly, then came back in, lifted the curtain and looked at the mother and son one more time. Finally, the prince turned and walked quickly. The moon was bright. The night dew was sparkling. The prince reached the end of the garden. Channa was still awake. "Channa!" The prince called out. "Bring me the horse Kantaka with full saddle and bridle." Although he had been warned by Yasodhara, Channa still asked, "Where are you going so late, prince?" Without answering Channa's question directly, the prince said, "Remember to check the horse's hooves. Feed it well before you set off." After finishing everything, Channa led Kantaka with full saddle, night clothes, including drinking water, food for both man and horse. The prince was a bit surprised at Channa's quickness and agility. Fearing that he would run out of time, he went to the horse, caressed and soothed it. This is a long journey, Kantaka. It is a very important journey for me. It is a journey that determines a person's whole life. Do your best. Kantaka stamped his feet and neighed loudly as if he was happy and joyful. Afraid that everyone would wake up, especially Yasodhara, the prince stroked the horse's head. Channa said, "Are you coming, prince?" He nodded and asked, "Is it big enough for 2 people, Channa?" "More than enough, prince. You can travel 1,000 miles a day and still be strong and energetic." The prince mounted his horse. Channa also gently jumped on and sat behind. Leaving the gate of the Palace of Joy, aiming at the southeast gate, the prince let his horse trot, leisurely and leisurely. The capital was sleeping soundly, with red lights still flickering here and there. The southeastern gate was always closed, but why was it wide open today? The guards were always on strict watch, but now they were all absent. Perhaps they were all drunk from the banquet and had fallen asleep. Looking up at the bright sky, the prince knew that his departure today was supported by the angels, so his will to become a monk seemed to have been given more strength. Out of the gate, the horse Kantaka seemed to want to show off its talent. It neighed loudly and then kicked its hooves, gliding lightly like a cool breeze. After about half a mile, the prince stopped the horse, turned back to look at the capital for the last time. Kapilavatthu lay still under the moonlight and among the flickering fires. The flower candle towers and giant torches on the 4 walls of the city were like a great rectangle of fire in the dark night. The prince had a strange, indescribable feeling. There, in that splendid ancient city, he was born, grew up, studied, and was pampered in the 3 palaces of joy. Also there, an innocent, carefree childhood playing with friends, and from then on, he was restless and troubled. There was his beloved wife from many previous lives, who understood him, sympathized with him, knew him from every hair strand of his thoughts and feelings. There was a young child with a small life that had just been born a few days ago. Then there was the king's father, a father who was both strict and kind. Although old, he was still as strong as a pine or a cypress. Then there was his aunt Gautami, who loved him like a mother loves her child, caring and worrying about him more than Nanda and Sundari Nanda, her own children. Then there were the princes and brothers. There were dozens of large conferences, hundreds of small discussions, but still could not find a solution to bring happiness and joy to many people. Still stuck, still confused about the meaning of life. Are they not, now asleep? Are they ignorant of the cruel cycle of birth and death? Are they contented with their eternal fate within the boundless confines of pain and suffering? The prince promised himself that he would find the path to immortality, or else he would never return to the capital city of Kapilavatthu. As the prince turned his horse and was about to leave, a bright cloud appeared in the sky in front of him. An angel dressed in noble and beautiful attire appeared, seemingly blocking his way. "Who are you?" asked the prince. "I am the king of the heavenly realm, your highness. What are you doing here?" "He is the king of the Vasavati heaven, the lord of the 6th realm of the desire realm, commonly known in the world as Mara. He is the great demon king with much blessing and power. All living beings, except the Brahma heaven, are under his control. Even the Trayastrimsa heaven and the Tusita heaven are no exception. Recently, the great demon king has heard that all the heavenly realms are in an uproar, especially since the gods in Brahma heavens came to invite Bodhisattva Setaketu to descend to the mortal world to continue his immortal path, to attain the fruit of perfect enlightenment to save living beings. Just now, the gods appeared in the palace of the capital city of Kapilavatthu to judge the crane. The great demon king also heard. Then the gods manifested as messengers of the elderly, the sick, the dead, the monks, to shock even the prince, who could not escape the great demon king's heavenly eyes. Especially tonight, in the middle of the sky, the heavenly beings rejoiced, played heavenly music, and held a festival to send off the prince who had left home to seek the path. The capital city of Kapilavatthu was shining brightly. The southeastern gate of the heavenly beings opened wide, allowing the soldiers to sleep, to facilitate the prince's departure. The great demon king knew everything, saw everything. He carried an indescribable feeling, both proud and afraid. The great demon king was the lord of darkness and ignorance. His power was only valuable when the world lived infatuated with the five sense pleasures. Those beings who practiced meditation to ascend to the realms of form and formlessness, far from material pleasures, had escaped the power of the great demon king. But he did not worry. When their blessings and meditation power ran out, they would fall back into the same trap. The great demon king was most worried about this prince, because the ultimate pleasures in the three pleasure palaces could not hold him back. The prince wanted to escape the power of the great demon king. Did the prince dare to seek light and the path to immortality? Absolutely not. Therefore, when asked by the prince, the great demon king spoke in a sweet voice, "I have come here with all good intentions. I bring you the good news that within 7 days the 7 treasures will appear. And thus the prince will be a holy universal monarch, ruling over the 4 continents with utmost wealth, immense prosperity, and supreme power." The prince smiled. "Are you tempting me? No, it is not a seduction. It is the truth. I only speak the truth. With the supernatural power of knowing the past and the future, I only tell the prince." "Oh," the crown prince said calmly, "then I thank you for your kindness. Now get out of my way." Where did the prince go? Why didn't he stay in the royal palace to wait for the appearance of the 7 treasures of the holy wheel-turning king? "Behold, I tell you, I refuse all the glory of the world. I reject all the sweet traps of the 5 desires. I will step out of your power, O demon king. Then I will dispel the darkness of ignorance. I will not accept a life of lowliness, delusion, and slavery. I will seek the light of the immortal path. I will travel far and wide to find a remedy to save millions of living beings. No matter the thorns or obstacles, they will not make my heels retreat. No matter the raging storms or the gusts of wind, they will not shake my will. No mountain of fire or pit of glowing coals can burn my determination. Choosing the path of renunciation is an irreversible choice. No one in this world can stop me. Go. Don't even think about playing tricks, deceitful tricks. You are darkness, then disappear with darkness. Disappear immediately." The great demon king knew that it would not be easy to sway the prince, a great being who had practiced the paramitas for countless lifetimes, but he would wait. The prince, while still in the mortal body of a human, would surely at some point make some mistakes, would have some bad thoughts, would have some moments of weakness, and at such times I would immediately appear, trying to lure him back into my power. Thinking thus, the great demon king disappeared into thin air. And from that moment on, the great demon king watched every step, every thought of the prince, seemingly for his entire life. Channa kept his mouth open, listening to the prince speak in the middle of nowhere. He was surprised because the conversation just now only happened in a private space between the great demon king and the prince. Only the prince could see and hear, no one else could. After chasing the demon king away, the prince calmly acted as if nothing had happened, bent down and gently stroked the horse's mane. "From now on, you will show off your power, my child. You will do your best. With your invincible horsepower, you will take me across the Sakya, across the Koliya, to the other side of the Mala kingdom, my child." Kantaka seemed to understand human language, raised his mane, stomped his hooves, neighed loudly, and then rushed off. From trotting, he changed to galloping. Then Kantaka displayed his divine horsepower for 1,000 miles. Then houses, trees, fields, hills suddenly receded further and further. Kantaka rode lightly like a white, but sitting on the saddle, the prince still felt like sitting on a velvet carpet, soft and unshaken. Following the direction to the southeast, after a while, he came across a wide highway, the main traffic route for merchants from Kosala to Sakya, Koliya, Mala, Vaji, Lichavi, bordering the Ganga River, and on the other side was the vast kingdom of Magadha. The prince calculated mentally from the geographical knowledge he had learned. From Kapilavatthu to Lumbini, where he was born, is about 6 yojanas, about 72 kilometers. From Lumbini to Koliya is only a few yojanas, but there is the Rohini River that must be crossed to reach the Koliya capital Devadaha. From here, it is only 4 or 5 yojanas to the Mala kingdom. Wherever there is a wide river, there is the Anoma River. Thus, the total route is about 14 yojanas, over 160 kilometers, and with this horsepower, we will cross the other side of Anoma at dawn, reaching the intended forest. As the prince had guessed, at the beginning of the third watch, Kantaka's horse crossed the Rohini River, a shallow section, and then continued on to Kolia. Not following the entrance to the capital city of Devadaha, but following the merchant highway, the horse still galloped gently. Occasionally, when excited, it neighed. The sound seemed to break the silence of the deep night. Perhaps starting to leave the Kolia territory, the prince stopped his horse by a lake by the roadside to rest. The morning star was shining brightly like a diamond. A cool breeze was blowing. The prince got down. Kantaka was sweating. Chana gave the horse water, green beans, sugar, and honey, all of which were fully prepared in his bag. They set out again. When the morning star had faded and the sky was bright, they reached a fairly wide river. Looking at the mountains and forests on the other side, the prince knew he had arrived. Thus, in just 1.5 hours, the invincible divine fishing boat had carried the prince and Chana over a distance of more than 10 yojanas, and it seemed to still be in good shape. The Enoma River has clear, blue water and is vast. Looking upstream and downstream, the prince found it difficult to hope to find a shallow section of the river, so he hesitated. Usually, there were large rafts here for merchants and travelers to cross the river, but looking around, he could not see any. The prince said, "Badia once said that there were 3 or 4 river crossings here, due to the needs of traders from different directions. So somewhere there must be a raft. We're going the wrong way, Chana. We must find a new landing to have a raft to cross the river. So it's about crossing the river." Chana said eagerly, "No need for that, prince. Kantaka can easily fly across this river. Is that possible? Are you sure?" "Certainly," Chana nodded. "When I was a child at the horse farm, I trained Kantaka to fly across a large pond, perhaps even wider than the river in front of him. He loved it. Wasn't that right, Kantaka?" As if understanding, Kantaka bristled his mane, stomped his feet, and neighed loudly. The prince and Chana mounted their horses again and went back a distance to gain momentum. The prince believed Chana's words and also believed in Kantaka's miraculous ability. Because during the long journey, Kantaka often galloped very fast, but his 4 hooves seemed to not touch the ground. And indeed, after gaining momentum, Kantaka flew quickly to the edge of the river. It bent its body to create thrust. Then, like an arrow released from a bowstring, it flew across the river like a beam of light. Kantaka flew so fast, the prince lay down and hugged the horse's neck, clinging tightly to his body to avoid wind resistance. Chana did the same, but due to the fast momentum, his 2 arms hugged the horse's hips tightly, but his 2 legs had to be spread out far behind, looking like he was clinging to the horse's tail. The wind blew fiercely in his ears. The bank appeared. Kantaka lost his momentum, stopped and neighed loudly because he knew he had won. Chana fell, face down. The prince got down, slowly went to Kantaka, held his head and said, "I thank you very much, Kantaka. You have carried me across the river so majestically and magnificently." And the journey itself, it was a crucial journey, a journey that shaped my life. You have enthusiastically helped me in taking the first step on the path to immortality. Once again, I thank you. Your merit and virtue are so noble, do you know? Kantaka seemed to understand. He looked at the prince with sad eyes, then he licked his hand with his tongue. The prince turned to Chana and said, I am leaving home, leaving everything behind, Chana. I am also very grateful to you for serving me so wholeheartedly all this time, always with enthusiasm and joy. That quality is very rare, Chana. Chana could only shed tears and choke. The prince turned back to look at the river and continued, There is a reason why we chose this river. If our geographical knowledge is correct, it is the Anoma River. It cannot be any other river. Anoma in its ancient meaning means noble, the most noble. From here, from Anoma, we will follow the noble, the most noble path. That is the path of renunciation. Looking back, mountains followed mountains, forests followed forests, lush green trees, silent clusters of rocks. A very strange feeling rose in my heart, a feeling I had never had before in my life. Chana's sad voice whispered in the prince's ear, The prince is gone and never coming back? I will return when I find the great way, Chana. Chana sadly, How sad everyone will be, prince. You are the bright star, the soul of Kapilavatthu. You are also the sun and moon of the people. Oh, how sad Princess Yasodhara will be. and the king, Lady Gautama, and the princes too. Everyone will miss you like their own heart. I know, Channa, the prince said as if explaining. I must sacrifice my narrow love to move towards a higher, broader love, Channa. I must find a way to save all living beings from suffering. Channa bowed his head, tears streaming down silently. Kantaka looked at the prince with tear-filled eyes. He too stood still, motionless. The prince suddenly took long strides and stood on a rock on a high mound of earth. With a decisive gesture, he shaved off his stubble. Then, with his left hand, he grabbed his hair bun. With his right hand, he raised his precious sword and severed his green hair. The prince looked up into the sky and made a great vow. If it is true that I have attained the fruit of perfect enlightenment, then let this handful of hair remain in the void. If it is not so, meaning that I have not attained Buddhahood, then let this handful of hair fall back to the ground. Having said that, the prince threw the hair into the sky, and it kept going up, 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 and up until it disappeared into the blue clouds. The reason was that the prince's supreme vow made the throne of Saka suddenly become hot. He hurriedly used his power to suck the hair up to the 33 heavens, caught it on a golden tray, and then worshipped it at the Kuamani Stupa 1. Channa saw the strange phenomenon, clasped his hands to the sky, and kept praying. The prince knew that he would become a Buddha and was joyful in his heart. He took out his sword, a string of pearls, a belt studded with lapis lazuli, and kindly gave it to Channa, saying, "This precious sword and lapis lazuli robe are my personal protections, always by my side and never leaving me. Please bring them back to my father, clearly state my unyielding will, bow to him for me and say, Siddhārtha is unfilial, has not yet repaid your deep kindness, has not asked for your permission but has left to seek the path of renunciation. I vow to attain Buddhahood. Siddhārtha will return to apologize to my father later." Channa held the relic in her hand, tears streaming down her face, and nodded. The prince continued, "This necklace is the necklace of love. In the beauty contest of the past, I had kindly bestowed upon Yasodhara. But the following year, Yasodhara put it back on me, saying, I am by your side, but can never be close to you, both literally and figuratively. The prince's mind and soul are always in some faraway realm, so please bring me this necklace so that I can feel warm because it is always in contact with your warmth and life. So Channa, please bring this necklace back to Princess Yasodhara and say, the prince has always loved the princess and her little son. The princess is the only woman in the world who has sympathized with me, who has silently supported my ultimate aspiration. When I attain enlightenment, I will return to see you and your son again." The prince suddenly patted Channa on the shoulder. "I know, Channa. If I had only paid a little attention, I would have known that Yasodhara had foreseen the time of my departure. Did she secretly meet you and tell you to prepare a saddle, drinking water, even green beans, sugar, and honey for Kantaka?" Yes, right." The prince sighed again. "Well, don't be so reluctant. My future enlightenment will be due to your merit. Yes. Channa's tears fell profusely. Kantaka's eyes were also wet like his master's. The prince stepped forward and once again caressed and soothed him. He bent down, licked his hand, and with tears streaming down his face. The prince was moved and spoke softly, "You too, go home, Kantaka. Your merit is not less than Channa's. Later I will also save you." Channa choked up and could not say a word. He bowed his head, grabbed Kantaka's reins, and pulled him away. Every farewell was painful and tearful. The suttas and commentaries say that when Kantaka turned his back and walked away, he had just taken 7 steps when his intestines burst and his heart burst, and he died. Another place explains that because he had used all his strength to fly across the river, so his intestines had already burst into pieces. However, he died after saying goodbye to the prince. After that, Kantaka was immediately reborn in the Tavatimsa heaven as a male deva named Kandaka. Another place says that Kantaka brought Channa back to the old garden, where he fasted for a whole week in the stable, and then peacefully breathed his last. Kantaka was also reborn in the Tavatimsa heaven as a male deva named Kandaka as above. Dear ladies and gentlemen, you have just listened to the video about the life of Buddha Shakyamuni, adapted from the work A Life, a Sun and Moon by Master Gioi Duc. This video series will be broadcast at 7 p.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the YouTube channel Buddhist Story. We sincerely thank you for watching. To not miss the next episodes, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. If you find the content useful, please share this video with your relatives and friends. All your comments are very valuable to us. Please leave comments below the video so we can discuss and share together. Thank you, and see you again in the next episodes of the video series, The Life of Buddha Shakyamuni.